So, why are you here? My guess is that you might be struggling with answering interview questions, or maybe you'd like to learn more about how employers want you to answer them. So today we're going to touch on why companies ask you these questions, go through some answer strategies, and show you some good examples, and then we'll practice with anyone who wants to try them out. So you may have thought about why companies would ask questions like, tell me about your biggest weakness, or tell me about a time you failed at work, or other big, scary questions like that. And it seems like every company has interview questions like this, and we never encounter these in everyday life. So companies usually ask these questions for a number of reasons. First, they are looking for examples of your real life work so that they can evaluate how you acted in certain situations to see if it matches up with who they are looking to hire. Second, they want to get a read on your interpersonal and emotional skills. So, are you comfortable talking to people? Are you nice? Do you get flustered or angry? Are you arrogant or too shy? And most importantly, they are waiting for you to tell them more information than they need to know so they can find red flags that let them know that they don't want to hire you. And most of us have fallen into this trap because we get nervous and talk so much with our answer that we usually forget, or we'll end up giving them our life story. Um, Sometimes that story contains information that could be used against us in the hiring process. So think of somebody interviewing for a forklift job, and when they're asked what your greatest weakness, they ramble for 10 minutes and then let's say that they've wrecked a couple forklifts. That is absolutely not what the interviewer wants to hear. For our purposes today, we want you to think of every question that is asked of you in an interview as boiling down to the same question. Why should I hire you? Every question an employer asks you can be linked back to this underlying question, and knowing this can help you focus your answers. So if you struggle with interview questions, you are not alone. Most people don't do a very good job of answering these questions. And a big reason is we do not practice these questions in our everyday life. Like, has anyone ever asked you, tell me about your greatest weakness when you're at the supermarket or a family gathering? I'm willing to bet that is a no. Really, the only time we ever answer these is when we're doing an interview. So if you only had a couple of interviews or you've never had an interview, then your experience with answering these tough questions is very limited. And these questions also force us to think of very specific events in our work lives in order to be able to answer the interviewer's question. And this sort of quick thinking and immediate recall doesn't work great for everyone. I am definitely one of those people. And it can lead to a deer in the headlights look where your mind goes blank or you get so nervous that you talk too long and end up forgetting what the question was. So we should follow an answer strategy. Interviews are naturally uncomfortable and strange for everyone, even the interviewers. There are a few ways we can get ahead, and I will hand it over to Brian to talk more about that.
Thank you, Alex. One of the first questions in most interviews is going to be tell me about yourself or why are you interested in this position? And this can be the first deer in the headlights questions that can sometimes set a bad tone for the interview if you don't treat it with enough respect. So you want to have an answer ready and prepared. You want to use your answer to discuss your skills, your experience, which includes the time you spent on previous roles. So we're going to introduce you to the set answer strategy for this question. Remembering the set structure will help you hit on all three topics when explaining how you're a great benefit to the employer. So we'll show you how that works in a second. So we just let you know that often the first test that the interviewer is going to throw at us is tell me a little bit about yourself. Now, when I ask this question in an interview, often I'll hear information that really isn't any of my business, and it doesn't really tell me about the individual as a potential employee. As mentioned earlier, employers typically don't want to hear your personal business or your favorite type of food. They want to hear the skills and work ethic that you're going to bring to their company. So remember that you're selling yourself as an employee. Put yourself on the other side of the table and think how personal information can be perceived. Tell me about yourself is your opportunity to sell yourself as an employee. This moment's the perfect time to tell your short story of employment by hitting on your skills, experience, and then and time, and then close up with a wrap up line like that's why I'm a great fit for this role. Always remember to summarize and hit on information that connects to the current position that you're interested in. So we're going to go through and do a handful of kind of bad ways to answer some of these questions, followed up by a better answer for the questions. So let's start out with the tell me about yourself. Um, well, I was born in 1981. I'm married with 3 kids. I went to college in California, and then I moved back to the East Coast when I was 21. I like to spend time with family. I've also got 3 dogs and 2 cats. My kids have bad allergies, and I've had to go to the doctor a lot this year. Did that answer your question? So this is a bad answer for several reasons. First, it gives up way too much personal information. You just let the interviewer know that your kids have medical issues, which they're thinking could lead to you calling off work frequently. Now, that may or may not be true, but that's what's going through the interviewer's head. And 2, you didn't mention anything about your employment skills, which is why you're there in the first place. I don't think the interviewer's going to hire based off of this answer. You want to structure your answer to use less personal and more relevant work experience. So now we'll take a better example of this question. Tell me about yourself. Well, I'm a customer service professional. I'm experienced in conflict resolution and relationship management. I spent 5 years in a call center environment with Company Z, where I was promoted twice, and now I'm currently the manager. I really enjoy helping people and solving problems. I've been in customer service for the last 12 years. Excuse me. And I would love to bring this experience to your company. This answer follows set and it gives the interviewer a good idea of where you worked, the skills that you have, and how many years of experience you have. And this is the key information that the interviewer is looking for when asking that question. Okay, so we've navigated past the initial tell me about yourself. Most employers are going to have a lot more questions following that. So we've all been in interviews when we get asked questions that kind of stop us and make us hesitate. Those tough questions like, what's your greatest weakness? And tell me about a time that you failed. Tell me about dealing with a difficult coworker or customer complaint. Some of the ones that you see on your screen. And these questions are called behavioral based questions. And they're designed to find out how you respond in different work situations. So today we're going to empower you with the skills to answer these questions utilizing the best possible way to impress these employers. And that is with the STAR method. So the STAR method is your tool to a successful answer leading to a successful interview. Utilizing STAR will help you clearly and effectively structure the best answer for the question being asked. So let's kind of run through what this acronym stands for. The S stands for situation. You want to set the scene and what's the background of the story. So what was your job? Where did you work? The kind of the baseline of all your information for the story. And then the T is for task. What's the task that was completed? Describe what you or someone needed to do. Maybe you had to load a truck by a certain time or handle a customer complaint. The A is the action, what you actually did to resolve the issue or complete the task. Could be coming up with a better solution to load the truck faster, help the customer with their complaint. How did you do it? What did you do? Make sure your answers and examples are positive ones, and do not tell a hiring manager that, oh, well, I had this problem and I went to my manager and they fixed it. That could always be the case, and maybe that's the way that the place was structured, but that's not what the interviewer is going to want to hear, that someone else had to solve the problem and not you. So the R is for the result. What happened as a result? Again, you want to make sure that it's an outcome and a positive one. So my team was able to get the truck loaded and out for delivery before our deadline, and we satisfied our customer's request. Or I talked to the customer, calmed them down, resolved her issue. She left happy. So quick review of it. S, what was the situation? T, what tasks needed to be complete? A, what actions did you take to resolve the problem? And R, what's the positive result when answering a behavioral-based question? If you have the STAR method in your head, it's going to help you kind of walk through the answer to the question, and then you can paint a perfect story for the interviewer. So remember, you want to think of these as short stories that you're retelling, just fitting them into the STAR structure and method. This next slide gives you a visual picture of how to answer your tough question and break it down into the STAR pieces. In this case, the questions describe a time where you had to work with a difficult colleague. By breaking your answer down with the STAR format, you are making sure that you are giving the employer the answer that they're looking for. You can even write out your answer like this for practice. And a tip on that is most employers, excuse me, will actually be writing down your responses in an interview guide with the questions. And typically, that interview guide is going to be set up in the STAR methodology. So they're going to be looking for these pieces of your story anyway. So why not go ahead and give it to them? Just a few more tips on the STAR method. Make sure to use real stories. These are experiences that you've lived through, and they should come off as a real story that you're telling. And paint the picture of how you took a bad or negative situation and turned it into a positive result. Employers want to hear how you were the one that was the impact and created the positive outcome. You want to try to keep it brief and relevant and avoid rambling or listing everything that you've ever done. Remember, most hiring managers are interviewing quite a few people a day, so you want to stand out and not lose their attention. Okay, so we've touched on some of these questions. Now let's look at some answers. I'm going to read through these questions and we'll walk you through some of the bad answers and then touch on good responses like we did a little bit ago. So first one, tell me about a time you received criticism at work. Some common answers that I've heard, or I've never been criticized, or I do good work. These are basically cop-out answers. Everyone's been criticized before. What the question is really getting at is if you get criticized at this job, how are you going to handle it? Will you adapt? Will you learn from it? Or are you going to be reactive and fly off the handle and create problems? So these are not the best way to answer this question. So tell us about a time you received criticism at work. Here's a better way to answer it with the STAR structure embedded in here. So when I was a cashier at a convenience store 2 weeks ago, it was my first week on the job. I left one day without doing my side work that needed to be done before leaving. My boss let me know that on my next shift, so I made sure it was part of my regular routine and it didn't happen again. So you can see the STAR structure there and the way that the details are laid out for the interviewer. And it ends in a nice, happy way. This shows that the person can take criticism, learn from it, and get better, and that's what the employer is looking for on that. All right, so one more here. It's always a tough question. What is your greatest weakness? So there's some examples on your screen of things that we've heard. I don't have any weaknesses. I'm not always on time, not a people person, avoid conflict. None of these are what an interviewer wants to hear. First answer is not believable at all. I don't know anyone that's perfect. I'm going to guess you don't either. And the other ones kind of raise some serious questions. If you're always late, that'll immediately be going through my mind is, okay, well, they're admitting that they have a problem being punctual. They'll probably have a problem doing that here. Not being a people person or avoiding conflict are also pretty bad answers. I would not use any of those in an interview. So a better way to answer this: what's your greatest weakness? One weakness I have is that I have taken work home with me too often. I find myself thinking about how to solve work problems during time that I should have been given my family attention. I was able to find a good work-life balance and actually help take my work to the next level. And I was promoted 2 months after I made this change. This answer is believable and realistic, and it has a nice, happy wrap up at the end of it. And this is one of the major keys of following the STAR method. You want to end everything positively and demonstrate how you were the one that made it end well. All right, I'll kick it back over to Alex and we can go through some
Yep.
questions.
Thank you. And we have some time left today to practice these questions. So if anyone would like, please type in the chat or maybe try to answer. Tell me about a time you failed. And then also in the meantime, if everyone could pop in the chat and ask if or you can just put what is the hardest interview question that you've ever gotten, or any interviewing questions in general that you may have trouble with. And as time persists, we will try to show you some answers to those or some ways to answer them. And yeah, and just to give people time to write, I'm going to throw you some samples, Brian.
All right, go for it.
So, how would you explain being fired?
Carefully. um, I would say, if you get the question, if you've been let go from a position, you know that. Um, don't let that be a surprise question. That's probably the first thing. Um, have something kind of thought through and prepared. A reasonable explanation is really what someone's looking for. And you want to take the negativity and the emotion out of it. If it was sour grapes and it didn't end well and you're still upset about it, and you open up about how terrible the company was prior, that's not going to reflect very good on you. And everything you say may be 100% true and factual, but that's kind of beside the point there. You want to think of a way to frame you leaving the company that comes out positive. It could be, um, you know, I started and I thought it was this, and then by the time I left, I was doing this, and this on top of my regular role. It wasn't working for me. It wasn't working for them. We parted ways. I thought it was time for a new opportunity. So you want to try to think through the answer that will allow you to take your negative emotions out of it. And even if it wasn't necessarily your fault in any way, take some responsibility for the situation, even if that's that you work there and it just didn't work out. But don't finger point, don't blame all on the company and you did everything right and they just took advantage of you and it was awful and you shouldn't have been fired. Even if that is the case, you want to try to frame it that you walked away with it and you learned something out of the experience.
Okay. And so just a reminder, if you have any interview questions, or like a really tough one that you've had in the past, you have that you would like help answering, feel free to put in the chat. Also, I guess we can just open up to more, if you have more general questions, we have a couple other sample questions and I'll just keep reading through those. And unless somebody has, and then I'll just look back in the chat and see if anyone has asked anything, and I'll read your question to Brian to answer. But so while we wait and see if somebody has something they want us to answer, so Brian, if I have a disability that is obvious and there are some duties that may need accommodation, how would you discuss this?
Well, before discussing it, I would thoroughly read through that job description, and make sure that you're going to meet every one of those qualifications, and that you know that you'll be able to perform all the essential functions in that role. Um, then once you go through the application process, if you think your disability would impact that role and you need some assistance, then it would be the time to bring that up. But there's no right time to do that. It's just kind of when you feel like it is necessary. You don't have to bring it up at all. So um, unless you know that it's going to be an issue or that you have a solution that you know that you're going to need, I would start with the job description. Make sure you feel good about that. Make sure that you know that you can handle all of those things. Um, and then once you get to the point in the interview where you feel good about it and or the hiring process, you may not have to disclose anything until you're on the job and working, and then it comes up with, oh well, now this is a bit of an issue. I think if I had this, I would be able to do my job in a much more effective way. So it's really a personal decision on the accommodations, and there's no obligation to disclose that in any way, shape, or form unless you feel like it will help. Um, but yeah, starting with the description, I think that's usually where people go wrong as far as that is where they're not either not being realistic or they haven't read it through thoroughly enough to ensure that they have. And then if you've got a simple fix, accommodations are typically a two-way street anyway. So I'm going to guess whatever you need, you're going to already kind of know, and then you can bring it up that way.
All right, and then I just want to hey, Kelly, if you can hear me, we do see your question, or it's not. I would recommend that we will have a link, or I will post a link at the end to our career center, which has a bunch of jobs that from employers who are dedicated to hiring people with disabilities. And we do have, you can search for remote jobs. And then if you just sign up for an account, we will automatically send you some remote jobs, or you can set up an alert yourself through the career center. Um, So again, opening it up, if anyone has any questions, or especially interview questions that they've had trouble with, or just questions about the process, things like that, feel free to put them in the chat. Uh, but I am going to ask Brian another question in the meantime. So, how do you remain calm during an interview? They are very stressful and uncomfortable, and so just wondering, any tips to remain calm during your interview?
Sure. There's a few ways you can attack that, and again, it's a bit of a personal thing. So, kind of knowing yourself and what gets you worked up, and then trying to attack that. But there's always, if it's there's the environment to deal with. It depends if it's an on-site interview, know where you're going and make sure you're there in plenty of time. Simple things, just make sure that you're not running in at the last second to try to run down just to make it to the interview. Um, get there early, plan your route, know where you're going. Um, make sure you've got that all written out if it's a certain room or if it's a certain person you're looking for, and get there early so that you can kind of calm yourself that way. If it's a phone interview or Zoom or anything like that, make sure that environment is settled too. Make sure that you've got your dogs put away, or kids watched. Anything that could kind of distract, that will keep you not focused, you want to try to handle up front. And then as far as the interview piece of it, earlier in the interview or the presentation, Alex mentioned the deer in the headlights, and I'm the epitome of someone that is the deer in the headlights. So, and I've actually done this on interviews, the night before, or a couple of days before, I looked up, behavioral based questions that we had on the screen. And then that way I have plenty of time to sit. I may not get asked and you may not get asked the exact question, but there'll be something along those lines. And then I'll think through, try to find a situation that I've gone through in my work life, and then I'll write down the answer. And I've done that with numerous questions. It kind of prepares you. It's kind of like studying for the test ahead of time. And then I've had phone interviews where I had the notebook in front of me and I got asked a version of the question, and it probably just made me feel better to flip through the pages so I knew where it was, because I didn't read my answer off, but I already had the answer and I could reference that, and that made me much less nervous and a lot more comfortable. Um, and it's not going to cost you anything other than some time. Everyone's going to ask versions of these questions, but um, that's kind of my view on it. That's what I say. You probably have a fair idea with yourself what gets you worked up, and then try to minimize those pieces of it.
Yeah, and I would add also, don't, if even if you're not doing a phone interview, even if you're going into a face to face, I would not feel bad about bringing like a notebook with questions in, and just like so you have them and you can flip through it while having your interview, as long as like if you can do it without like being very distracting with it, I think it's fine. I literally do that. I bring a notebook question or notebook in just so I can keep track of things, because I am also a person who, like, if you ask me a question, I will ramble until I forget what you asked. Piggybacking off like questions that will be less likely to make someone uncomfortable when you ask it. Uh, Asking if you're looking for, like, when you say culture, think about the specific things you're looking for in a work culture. So one of the things that pops out to me, especially in terms of disability, is if they have an ERG or employee resource group, which are kind of they're like they're groups maintained within the company, like they're like volunteer groups from employees in the company to support people like with disabilities or who are minorities in some way. um yeah, that's, or like just some, if you're worried about work-life balance, literally just ask them straight up about work-life balance, if that makes sense.
Be careful with how you ask that.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
don't want.
I can be very direct sometimes. Yeah, if I yes, you can ask in a nicer way. um
Well, thoughtfully, because you don't want to have the person perceive it as, oh, this person's just worried about their free time. Um,
mhm,
so you just have to be careful and kind of think through. But that, yeah, the short answer to that question is I would take it a couple of steps down from corporate values and cultures and try to make it a more specific question that will get you the answer that you're looking for.
mhm.
Unfortunately, that is the attitude I think sometimes of people, is you should be just be grateful for the opportunity, which is a terrible way to look at it. So
Mhm. Although I do
sorry,
think
sorry you've
that,
had to have that
yeah,
vibe thrown at you, Nicole.
yeah. Okay. So Nicole says, thank you, very insightful, and then asks, what questions can gauge indirectly how an organization will handle my disability if I'm going to get harassed, seen as lesser, etc. I ask questions related to culture to get a temperature check on how I will be perceived.
Hmm.
So just so an ERG, you can ask if there is a disability related ERG. That's a good one. It mostly applies to larger companies. Um, just because that means that they do have disability like in mind, like in the workplace. So they're probably more likely to be fine or not have harassment or things like that. That's one. I don't know, Brian, if you could think of any others.
I'm thinking. Sorry,
Yeah.
I mentioned earlier I'm not quick on the answers. So
Yeah, I understand. I will
this is
also.
a very good question, and it's
Mhm.
I mean I think it would require some thought. That's why I'm trying to. I don't know that
Oh,
I'll have a magic answer for you, but
mhm.
the ERG is good. I would probably, this isn't a direct answer, but I would probably look at it.
Yeah,
No, your question's just fine. It's
yeah,
a great question. Um,
yeah. So, and kind of in the same vein, like maybe ask, like, are there other people who are disabled who work for your organization. Like especially if you have like a visible disability, um, like there will probably be some disability talk, or they will be more comfortable talking about disability if they're seeing you with a physical or a visible disability. But yeah, so asking if there are any support for things for that. You probably will have to disclose that you have a disability when asking these sorts of questions, or at least in this way, um, which some people are uncomfortable with, but it's kind of one of those things where you just have to judge it by the company. Like maybe not ask that right off the bat, maybe have other questions, and you'll have your normal interview before you get to the part where you're asking them questions, and you'll be able to have a better judge of what they're comfortable with.
You know,
Hopefully,
I would take
yeah.
it from like the research standpoint, I guess, Alex, is where, because that's
Hmm.
just how my head works, where it would be, what are some companies that you would like to work for, or that you've seen good examples of the culture and the things that you're looking for there, that you'd be treated well. And then what are some of the things that they do, and maybe ask those specific questions of like, would not necessarily the company X does this, do you do this, but kind of take things that you've seen in other companies or that you've researched and like, that's really good. And then, kind of incorporate that as a question to the current role in the company.
Yeah, and that is another thing. Like, especially if you're like going to a place, if you will physically see if they're, if they're wheelchair accessible, or they've made these sort of simple accommodations. If they haven't, that's kind of a red flag.
Yeah, and I think the person, I mean, always trust your gut too, because you're going to have, if you get a good feeling from the interviewer, that's going to put you more at ease, and maybe you can ask some more questions. But if you kind of feel that this might not be the place, I would probably leave it at that,
Hmm.
and trust your initial feeling and how welcomed you are just in general.
Hmm.
Some companies do a great job with all of this. A lot of them don't. So I mean, there's no shame, and I don't think this place is for me.
Hmm. Okay. Well, hopefully that if that didn't answer your question, feel free to like ask it again, kind of reworded, or you can email us directly later. If we can stew on it more, maybe. Um, but in the meantime, other people, anyone else can ask anything they want. But just to keep, oh, no problem, Patty. Patty says, thank you. These are great tips. And Nicole says, thank you for the thoughtful answers. You're quite welcome. And we have a couple more questions. I'm just going to continue asking Brian questions until somebody else has a different one. So, Brian, if a person doesn't have any job experience, or what would you do if you are a person applying for a job and you have no job experience, or you just graduated college?
Um, I would say, I mean, I don't know that that really would affect you negatively. Kind of depending on um, what the role is, and kind of what you're, if you're just out of college or just out of high school, you want to just make sure that it's narrowed down and you fit the qualifications. But experience does kind of the same thing. If you've had any volunteer work or just the degree that you completed, I feel like that's kind of an overly stressful thing. It's probably not as stressful as you are making it. Just the fact that you don't have the work experience, everyone starts somewhere. So I don't know that as an employer would look at that negatively initially. If if no experience, I would talk about your schooling experience, what you want to do, or you can always incorporate anything you've done in your past that you think would help benefit the role that you're after. Um, don't really, um, the
Mhm.
only thing I could see, I mean, if you had gaps in your work experience, that would need to be explained. If it's just, you worked for a little bit and then you haven't worked for 5 years, that's a question that I would want an answer to. But in general, if you've just graduated or you just haven't worked before, um, the real answer to those are just why. Because you just didn't feel like it's probably not the best answer, or um, I didn't want to work after high school, so I just, you know, hung out at home for 5 years and now I want to get to work. But honestly, that's actually a reason. So as long as you can kind of explain any gaps,
Mhm.
but yeah, being young and just graduating, I don't think would be viewed negatively, or I wouldn't view it negatively for somebody that's trying to get a job.
Mhm. I would also point out that if you have life experiences that gives you some sort of qualification, feel free to like include those. Like if you volunteer for things or things like that. If um so the worst thing they can do is not like look at your resume or not call you back. So I would put those, like, if you've had experience in something for a job, or for example, I actually worked at a job before. So I do not have a degree, but I've kind of worked in positions where I am doing specific like technical things that have caused me to be able to move forward in my career. Um, without the necessary degree, but I can show that I've actually like done the work that a someone with a degree would do, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, it comes down to what you can do. I mean,
Hmm.
as long as you can explain it away. I mean, the gap
Right.
thing, I always asked about gaps in employment, but I don't think that's exactly the question you're asking. But
Yeah.
it's kind of like being fired question. Have a reasonable answer.
Mhm.
Explain what you're looking to do. I mean, I just don't think that's something I would ever look on negatively, and neither would anyone else from an interview standpoint.
Okay. Well, and again, if anyone has any questions, feel free to throw them in. I'm going to do one more question to Brian, just from my mental Rolodex of questions. But we were talking about, and this kind of applies to the um, kind of the culture, the idea of getting an idea of what someone's culture or a company's culture is going to be like. But what ways can people research employers?
Um, Google's the easy answer.
Mhm.
Um, Yeah, having any knowledge on the company, we do see people where, um, you know, shoot off 20 applications at once, go to whoever calls them first, walk in, and you don't even know what the job is or what the company does. So,
Mhm.
um, I think that's really the genesis of this question, where it's kind of take some time, look the company up, go to their website, see what they do, how they do it, how long they've been around, what's their kind of community activity, what do you connect um, with the company? What are the things you really like about them? Um, like you don't have to know, um, what their last earnings report said, or what the latest news story is. Although I would look up news also when you do that,
Mhm.
but just have a general fairly reasonable knowledge of what the company does, how long they've been around, and the role that you're applying for. Because I think that is kind of an infuriating piece for an interviewer if it's pretty apparent you don't even know why you're there. So coming in with the bare minimum of knowledge is appreciated. And it also kind of helps the interview process along. You'll be able to um, discuss some specific things of the company which as you go through doing your research, hopefully you'll have a few questions to throw at the interviewer.
Okay. Yeah, and Ashley actually posted a link that with tips on how to do research like that. And if you actually look, there's a place called Room Content next to the About button. If you look through that, there's a lot of great resources that Ashley is actually the one who uploaded and made most of them. But so we have our job seeker resources PDF and like a quick overview of it in a flyer, and then our 2025 job market guide, and then a webinar PDF. Yeah. Were there any other? Oh, also, I just got a response from Texas Workforce Commission. I don't remember exactly. If you're still on here, they will be. Let me. Sorry, I'm reading. Okay, so yes, if you wanted to contact the Texas Workforce Commission, send me a private message. You can do that by clicking on my name or the three dots next to my name, I believe. Or just click on my name under moderators, and then you should be able to send me a private message, and then I will get you guys connected to them. Okay, Patty just responded in here, or you can message Patty. Yeah, sorry, still reading. Okay. Well, we have about 10 minutes left, so quick review. We went through some tough interview questions and taught you how to use the STAR method to answer them. We told you to practice these questions and write out your responses because you never know when you might be changing jobs or looking for work. And it's just in general a great skill to have. All employers, every employer I have met with has had some form of behavioral question in the interview process. So it's great to just be ahead of the game. So I will put our Career Center information up here again. Once again, if you're a job seeker, you can sign up for a free account, and I encourage you to do so. If you're with a community organization, I encourage you to reach out to me, and I can get you on our inclusive employer emails. Yeah, and finally, I'll add our contact information. If you have any questions, feel free to ask any questions here or contact us at any time. Our email is jobseeker@disabilitytalent.org. Our career center is jobs.disabilitytalent.org. And yeah, thank you for listening. And I'm going to stay around in the chat for a while longer to see if anyone has any other questions.
We got another one, Alex.
Oh, yep. Can we review the SET method? Okay, yeah.
Yeah, you wanna scroll back. So,
Yeah.
I mean, the SET method is essentially these are not the behavioral based questions like this STAR method would use. These are just kind of those intro, open ended. Why are you here? Tell me about yourself, sort of thing. And it's just a quick structure for you to not ramble on for 10 minutes and hit on what the interviewer is looking for. So the skills are just going to be let me read it here so I don't kind of botch that up trying to explain it. But the short story with the skills, your experience, and how long you were there, and it just gives you a quick methodology to roll through that answer and not. I think we had the example answer where someone rambles on and talks about their dogs and their cats and their kids, and it'll help you make the answer more concise and throw in the work history that the employer really wants to hear about. And this is also something that you could be prepared for, because you're going to get hit with that. You could be sitting down or the opening of the interview and, well, okay, well, tell me a little bit about yourself. And you may be trying to get relaxed, and not having that will kind of throw some people off. So already have that answer kind of mapped out and prepared before you sit down, and that way you'll avoid the rambling.
Mm-hmm. And does this make sense on why this is a set answer? This is more, well, you can't really respond with, but hopefully this makes sense as like a sort of funnel, almost, is how I think of the SAT questions.
That's a
that.
good analogy. So yeah, the answer on the screen is the 5 years in a call center environment. So um, it does have the time kind of push into the initial part of the answer, but where they worked, what the job was. Really enjoyed helping people, solving problems, customer service for the last 12 years, and then the wrap up line. So yeah, it could be any answer, and just try to hit on those three pieces of information. You don't have to make it your entire work history if you have an extensive one. Just kind of summarize, and that way it gives the interviewer a quick feel for who they're dealing with. And um, I think Keith always gives the example of you sit down and talk to somebody and say they don't throw in that, they have 12 years of customer service experience, and they wait till the end to throw that. You're kind of burying the lead there, because you want to know that up front. So I'm talking to someone that's been doing this for a while. They know what they're doing. They have some experience, versus trying to feel them out the entire conversation. So it gives a better setting for the rest of the conversation.
Mm-hmm. And also, if you didn't see, Ashley actually posted like a quick blurb for that, like just quickly explains the SENT, and it might be good to like copy and paste that somewhere. You can also find it in the other link that Ashley gave us right before that. All right. Any other questions? Okay. If you guys didn't see that, Patty just posted, if you're interested in Texas Workforce Vocational Rehabilitation Service via our office lookup, put the zip code. So she posts a link to that, and then put the zip code in and select vocational rehabilitation for the office in that area. So for those, I don't know, I'll have to look back through the chat to see who was interested. So Patty, I'm going to look through and see who was asking about you guys. And if they weren't here, I will send them your way as well. Also, yes, and then everyone. Thank you, Patty. All right. Oh, the link isn't working. Looks like it's maybe catching that. So if you click the link, there's a bit at the end that I think is not supposed to be there. Yeah. So if you delete the part after lookup and then hit enter, it will go up to that page, or I can just copy and paste it again. Okay, Ashley already did it. All right, so I will be sticking around here. We will get off the we're probably going to get off mics, but I will still be in this room to answer questions. If you remember, you can be in 3 rooms at once, and you can visit more rooms by hitting the back to all rooms button at the top. You will actually keep in this room until you hit the X under the My Rooms next to the name. So you won't lose your place here if you hit back to all rooms to look at the other presenters we have going on. All right. Yep. Thank you very much. I'm turning off the, well, actually here, I'll just keep this up for a little bit. Oh. So here's a link or all our links. Let me know if you would like them copy and pasted into the chat and I'll do that.